Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Super Tease video. And to keep myself accountable to you all, I made a 10.2.6 prediction PvP tier list for Solo Shuffle, and that is the list that you are looking at right now. And we're going to go through every specialization and see how accurate I was based on how things have unfolded now over about the last week and a half and how things are feeling. If you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, entertaining educational content, then smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now, Destruction Warlock, I ranked this on S tier. It did receive some nerfs, particularly to its mobility, where I think it was hit mostly the hardest, as well as its observer health, but it is still a remarkable caster with many diminishing returns of crowd control, and it pairs up really well with so many different specs. I think with that kit that it's more than fair that it is going to be on the S tier. Balanced Druid got some survivability buffs with Frenzied Regen, and I've been seeing a lot more of them pop up in competitive play. I think it is a highly versatile caster, although if it's in the hands of a beginner who doesn't know how to utilize the Cyclones effectively, it's going to feel a bit weaker as an option. So it's not the most beginner friendly. I wouldn't say it's a terrible beginner specialization, but I think it's actually still fair to say that it is an S tier specialization. Demonology Warlocks are still incredibly durable and bring even more crowd control than Destruction Warlock. I know now doing my 2400 challenge on a Windwalker monk that I get CC'd a lot when there's a Demonology Warlock. I think that this specialization is still an absolute monster. And I think it's actually still fair to keep it up here on S tier. I think I'd still legitimately keep it up here on S tier. Elemental Shaman recently completed the 2400 challenge, queued up a lobby of it today. Still felt phenomenal. Easily like the best range specialization for beginner to advanced. You're gonna have a great time climbing on this specialization. I absolutely loved it. It was a blast. It's mostly instant cast damage, fusing Primordial Wave together with your Skyfury Totem and just lava bursting everybody and watching the entire team melt when you proc Ascendance is super satisfying. So yeah, I feel maybe I would say maybe Ellie's maybe better than Demo or something like that by moving it over to the left, but it's still on the S tier. Havoc Demon Hunter, even despite all the nerfs that hit it, I'd say the main, like what you're going to notice with it is that you die more often to Ret Paladins and Windwalker monks. Classes that do like a lot of damage in a stun are able to kill Demon Hunters more frequently, but everybody else is still pretty miserable. So I think it's more than fair that I think Demon Hunter is up here on the S tier. Outlaw Rogue, this is likely going to be the first specialization that I'm going to end up actually moving around. I played it after the nerfs. I completed the 2400 challenge before the nerfs, played it after, and it felt noticeably weaker defensively. It's still really complicated. It is absolutely not a beginner-friendly specialization. I honestly can't recommend any rogue specialization. If you're a beginner, you're going to have an initial kind of burden when climbing on this class in general. I still think it is better than Subtlety, though. And Subtlety is honestly maybe ranked too high. So right now, it's definitely fallen down, I think, from S. I think we're going to put it on A tier for now. We'll shuffle it around within the A tier itself in a bit, but I think it's going to feel a little bit weaker, and again, not being so beginner friendly, but I still think it's really good. If you're getting the procs and setting up around your subterfuge, you can do just a remarkable amount of damage still. It's still really versatile with a lot of different specs, although it can be a little bit more frustrating if you get classes that have a lot of stuns, DRing your stuns. Survival Hunter, this one is also not super beginner friendly, but I think it is very good. It's also a little bit squishier. S tier might have been an overestimation, but can you really blame me when it was getting buffs of like 16% on some of its abilities? I think that was kind of like a fair overassessment. Probably going to be dropping it down though. I think A tier is a little bit more suited for survival specifically. Just given its squishiness, not super beginner friendly. I think going down from S to A, but again, predicting S with how big its buffs were, I think this is still pretty close to a good guess or a good estimate. Restoration Shaman, still phenomenal healer. This healer just bullies almost everybody else at the moment. It is a really good one at the moment. You really can't go wrong with it. I think it's definitely still in the S tier. On to the A tier, we've got Arcane Mage. I'd say Arcane Mage got hit the hardest of all of the mage specializations. It's the most complicated one, the hardest one by far to play, but it's still the best at kiting melee DPS. It's still, really versatile. I think A tier is still suitable for it. Shadow Priest, I've been playing mine, and it's been quite a ride. It's been quite a ride on the Shadow Priest for me. Some lobbies I'm going 0-6, other lobbies I'm going 6-0. I recently switched my build from Talbadar's build to WizK's build, and that one has been working a lot better for me. I think I just peaked over 2150 or something on it on my way to 2400. It is not beginner friendly, and melee DPS make you absolutely miserable. So I will say that. You have to cast a lot, and when there's a lot of interrupts, it is really tilting. So if it's going to stay in the A tier, I think that it's the bottom of the A tier. So we're dragging it all the way down. Bottom of the A tier, I think, for Shadow Priest. Frost Mage, you still got to play around your Frost Bomb window. If you don't know how to land a Frost Bomb, you are not going to be having a ton of success on Frost Mage, but it's still easier to play than Arcane, just lobbing out Ice Lance procs outside of this, cutting melee DPS around. It's really tanky. Easier to play than Arcane in terms of setting up your Arcane charges and trying to get Touch of Magi coordinated with missiles procs. There's a lot going on with Arcane that you don't have to deal with as Frost. More beginner friendly. Is it really the best of the A tier, or do I want to drop it down? I think it is definitely an A tier specialization. It is really tough to deal with. This spec as like a Windwalker monk or almost any melee DPS that doesn't have like any sort of range damage. It's like impossible. I think we'll leave it where it is. Maybe it's slightly better than Arcane now. These are really close. It's really tough to say. Beast Mastery Hunter, still really good specialization, really well rounded, kind of squishy. But honestly, I've seen a lot of hunters adapting the strategy that I outlined in my Hunter guide, even as Beast Mastery, and it's actually still effective, which is using things like Scatter Root Trap on DPS and Diamond Ice Trap on DPS, and just controlling damage dealers and pumping out as much pressure as possible. Because not a lot of other DPS can do that. They can't like put an undispellable polymorph and remove a DPS from the game for, a melee DPS. You can CC them for upwards of like 11, 12 seconds. And just pump out damage the whole time for free without having to worry. And with that strategy adaptation, I'm seeing a lot more hunters having success. BM Hunter is still really good. I'd say defensives are preventing it from getting into S tier, but I think A tier is still absolutely fine for Beast Mastery as well as Marksmanship Hunter if you're using those strategies. Devastation Evoker, I think it got a little bit more tankier with the changes that came through. It's still really good and really well rounded, just tons of damage on Disintegrate. I think it got more tanky as well through his baseline talents. So I think either A or S, honestly. For Devastation Evoker, it's going to be pretty beginner friendly as well. This is maybe it's the best of the A. We'll shift it around a little bit to the best of the A. Affliction Warlock. Where do we want to put this guy? I think because dampening is faster, Affliction's damage ends up being a lot more relevant quicker. But it's not very beginner friendly, especially given that you have to cast Unstable Affliction. I saw that they're bringing a glyph actually that might bring Soul Rot to being on the Shadow School. You can get the Shadowlands version of it again. So hopefully that will actually be the case, because that would definitely help it to have Soul Rot not be on the the Shadow Tree, so you can actually cast multiple schools of magic. I think A tier is still pretty solid though for it. I think it's a fair spot. I think we're going to leave it where it is. If you've got multiple flex builds, you can stay Soul Rot AoE, you can run Oblivion single target when you need burst damage. If you're playing with a setup class, it's pretty flexible, works with a lot of different things. I think it's fair to say that it's A, just not super beginner friendly. We dropped Outlaw Rogue down to A. I think that's where it's going to remain. Ret Paladin is actually really good. It is actually really good. You might still have some lobbies with double caster that can be difficult, but even those I swear aren't that bad. I don't know what happened to Ret, but Ret is actually just remarkably good. I think I'm leaving Ret here, or it's going up to S. I think it's still remarkably good. Survival, we just dropped down here. It's going to be in the spot. Windwalker, I'm actually bumping up. I think that I've just made one, and I never played it before, and I was really expecting it to be hard, and it absolutely wasn't. It was immediately 1800 with really crappy gear and no enchants just from PvP boxes. It just does so much damage the entire time. You can swap targets. It feels remarkable to play. Like, your damage is just high the entire game. Paralyze is a really good cooldown. Your Serenity window, 2-minute cooldown, powerful cooldowns like Serenity are really good. I'd say the main tilting factor is like Mage, Frost Mage, and Hunter. Things with like ranged roots and snares that can prevent you from connecting to your target can be a little difficult, but its pressure and tankiness is definitely up there. I think it's deserving of being S tier. Arms Warrior, still really good. I think it's still going to be sitting here in the A tier. Really well rounded, difficult to deal with mages and hunters still, but you synergize really well with pretty much everything in the game. You got a little bit of an execute buff. I think you're solid where you are. Unholy Death Knight, I'm actually going to drop it here. I think Unholy Death Knight is actually B. Most of the time, I see the specialization just kind of falling over as the first target to die. Doesn't get a huge amount of pressure unless it gets like a really lucky Apocalypse crit with a bunch of Bursting Wound crits all at the same time. I think that Unholy is actually down a tier. Subtlety Rogue, it's kind of the same thing. I think I'm going to be dropping this down a tier. Normally, I rank subtlety really high, but I have not been seeing a lot of them, and not a lot of them doing well on all the different classes that I play from a wide variety of rating ranges, right? Like I'm playing from fresh characters at 1500 MMR all the way up to 2700 MMR frequently on my stream. Link in the description down below. I think I'm actually, is it really not? It's the worst of the A if it remains on A, and I think we'll leave it here for now. But yeah, Resto Druid, still really solid healer. I think A tier is more than fair for it. I've seen a lot of healers who are in my lobbies at 1500 that have like no gear, and they're still winning lots of games against healers that are fully geared that aren't Druid. Druid's obviously still strong. Mistweaver and Shuffle, I actually kind of want to jump up to S. I feel like Fistweaver Monk is disgustingly good, and if you have a gear set for both Caster and Fistweaver, that you can just absolutely dominate almost any situation. I'm doing it. I'm risking it, man. I'm saying Mistweaver is actually S. I think we're moving into a Mistweaver meta. Between Shaman and Mistweaver, I think that they're really close at the moment. For B tier, we got Holy Paladin. I think that's still a fair spot for it. It's still really flimsy defensively. Most of the time, like a Ret Paladin is just going to casually walk at you and you're going to just blow over in a small gust of wind. And that's the main problem, is its personal survivability when it's getting attacked by a lot of these classes. Disc Priest, I've been seeing it a lot more frequently. I should play mine again after the buffs that it got with the Atonement. I kind of want to say that it's better than B. It gets bullied by Shamans, but I think it's better than Paladin. I'm going to jump it up to A and solo. This is solo shuffle. In rank 3s where the game's a little bit longer, you kind of run into mana problems. But in solo shuffle, you don't really notice that as much. I think A tier is actually appropriate for it. Fire Mage, same deal here, actually. Fire Mage is really good in this patch. I ranked it a little bit lower, not expecting where it would go with the changes that it got, how impactful Living Bomb was going to be. But I actually think, and with the Ring of Fire nerfs, I think Fire is either A or S. It might actually maybe be even close to the best A tier. We'll put it under Devastation Evoker for now. Augmentation Evoker, I think we're still going to leave it B. You can sometimes get a lobby where you make it work, but it's not. I don't think it's comparable to Devastation. Unholy, we just dropped down to B. Feral Druid, I think even despite the survivability buffs, it can be tough to cast clones, and you're still really squishy. Even despite the survivability buffs in the lobbies that I've seen Feral Druids, you're kind of dying a lot. So B is probably still fair for you. Enhancement Shaman, you got limited mobility, but the healing buff, even with high dampening, was really noticeable when I played my Enhancement Shaman recently. I may look to complete this spec next, actually. It was kind of fun playing it. It's just the only spec in the game where you like frequently crit like 300,000 numbers. So even though you got low mobility, you've got big numbers to compensate for that to some regard. So I think B tier is probably still a good spot for it. Preservation Evoker, this is still absolutely miserable in Shuffle. Even despite the buffs, it's mostly because you're limited range, people running out of it, people not staying in your Dream Breast, a lot of your abilities being skill shots relative to the other healers, which the gameplay is really fun, but with the limited range and other healers not having to play that way, makes it a bit unfair for you to keep up. You're also bits on the squishier end. I'd say the cheat death is better. I see a lot more players picking the cheat death talent when they get low. They get another image of you procs in and heals that got buffed, but I think it's still not stupendous. I think in C tier is probably still where it's going to be, if not going down to D. We got Holy Priest here. Holy Priest it's better. I tried the Lightwell build. My stats aren't exactly ideal, I think, for Holy compared to playing Disc a lot. But even despite that, it still felt like you didn't have a lot of control of the game, and I was running out of mana before a lot of healers. I'd say out of all the healers that I have played, which is all of us a Mistweaver at this point, and I know Mistweaver is not going to have mana problems, that you run out of mana the fastest, and that's the hardest problem. The Chastise change is okay. I run into some problems now with Imperial Blades being passive, where like you'll chastise a target, you'll want to reset your chastise and chastise another target, which then means you've wasted 2 charges of instant Holy Fire, which feels kind of bad when you're going for like double stun. Even though it's nice to have the keybind bloat brought down a little bit, those moments can be a bit frustrating in PvP. I think it's still honestly like at best, I think B. I think it's like maybe slightly better with Lightwell. It's adding more passive healing, making it a bit easier for beginners and stuff. A little bit of extra healing when you're CC'd. But it's not, I don't think it's super great still. Assassination Rogue. I'm seeing this one. See, now I feel like I have to bring Subtlety Rogue down if I'm going to leave Assassination here. But I just never see Subtlety. If I'm being honest with you guys, I literally just never see it anymore. Even on my 2700 tunes. I just don't see anybody playing it. So it's really hard to rank it. I don't even know if I can rank it. We might just leave it as unknown for now. But Assassination I do see, and it's actually doing, I don't know if it's like bugged or something, but sometimes it's just doing insane damage and just kills somebody for no reason. I actually think it's probably better than C. I'm jumping it up here onto the B tier for now. I think Outlaw is still slightly better than it. Pulling off the one-shot combo can be difficult. And it's also much more weaker defensively. You're much squishier. It's kind of similar to Feral in that regard, so I think it makes sense for it to be on this tier. But the burst damage you can do is actually really good. Fury Warrior, even despite the execute buffs, I think is still down in D tier. You're just not doing enough damage. The fact that your Mortal Wounds effect doesn't take priority of other classes' Mortal Wounds, it's tough to get the full stacks of it. It just doesn't have anything really going for it that's super compelling that Arms doesn't with other things that Arms does, like big burst damage and Bladestorm to immune CC and guarantee that it connects its cooldown. Not having Bladestorm, which I think you're actually getting back at least in the War Within next expansion, but for right now, not having Bladestorm is like a really big deal, and not having great damage in comparison to other classes, limited mobility, only melee range. Not a lot going for it. Frost DK is super niche. Sometimes I see it do really well, and it can do well in solo shuffle because enemies aren't in voice communication. So if you are good at getting your triple blinding sleets, sometimes people will underreact or overreact, and then you can one-shot them with the next one. It's just a super niche spec that honestly I think needs to have more flavor and texture added to it as a spec, so it's more than just a grip AoE, blast everything down type of spec, adding a little bit of more layers to it, more CC effects, and maybe more damage outside of its cooldowns. I think could put it in a better direction, but I think it's still definitely, maybe it's not the worst. I think Fury Warrior is honestly the worst, so we'll leave Fury Warrior here at the absolute bottom, and then Frosty K just a little bit above it. So my prediction, how off were we? Windwalker moved up a tier. We saw Outlaw Rogue go down a tier. We saw Fire Mage go up a tier. Like, I'd say I was wrong on like 4, 5, 6 specs maybe by like 1 tier-ish. I think it was pretty close in my estimation with this. And I hope that this tier list has helped you figure out like what's going to be a good selection for you, or maybe justify why you're struggling with a spec, because there are absolutely some reasons to justify struggling. You're going to have to be a god to make it work on some of these specializations that are coming in from basically B down to D here. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and the discussion, and I will see you in the next one.